Radio TV Phono Nut here in our latest estate sale finds before we get into a repair video. There was a guy here in town. I met him about 30 years ago whenever we had an antique radio club. And this guy, I think he was originally from Kansas City, and then he lived in California for years, and then he relocated to Mississippi in the early 80s. He was big time into music, recording, electronics, you name it, he was into it. And whenever I saw him umpteen years ago, he had a house full of stuff, a recording studio in his basement. Well, he passed away about a month ago, and I found out they were going to be having a series of estate sales to liquidate his stuff. And the person who told me they had been there, they said if you were over here, you'd feel like you had died and gone to heaven. But problem is, I was unable to get a ride over there until the sale they had yesterday, and unfortunately, all of the really good stuff had been picked over. But I did manage to get a few things. The first thing I got was this 20-inch Hitachi color TV from 1984. This one's in above average condition. In fact, it was well taken care of. It's a stereo TV monitor with two composite AV inputs on the back and an old style VTR plug as an input, as well as external speaker inputs. Now, the tube is strong and all that, but I can tell that we got some capacitors that are starting to fail, and we'll address that one day. Biggest pitfall of these Hitachis is flyback transformers going bad. I was running into that 25 or 30 years ago on these, so if I plan on keeping this set, I'll probably need to go ahead and source a flyback just to have as a spare. But other than that, the main problems these had were capacitors that like to pee everywhere and bad solder connections. But as well kept as this set is, it's worth doing some preventative maintenance on. And there was also a Matsushita built General Electric stereo VCR from 1984 connected to this television, which I also got. Most likely they were both bought at the same time. And then stashed up in the attic, I found this Hewlett-Packard Model 400H VTV-M. And then we found a Hewlett-Packard 200 CD audio oscillator. It's vacuum tube based. And then we found this little Heathkit, little small oscilloscope, probably from the 1950s, mid to late 50s, I would guess. Now, this Hewlett-Packard audio oscillator, this is just like the ones we had in the electronics classroom at the local community college whenever I went through the program from 99 to 2001. Now this one here is a little bit newer. Best I can tell from date codes, this one's from 1970. It uses miniature tubes and uses a more modern 3-wire plug-in power cord. But anyway, I love him, but he drives me crazy with that barking sometimes. But the ones we had in the electronics classroom, according to my instructor, were from 1965, and I believe they had a hard-wired power cord, and I don't think they were grounded. But Hewlett-Packard made these things for many years, from the 1950s until well into the 70s. Also in the classroom, they had some old Hickok teaching systems, vacuum tube based audio generators, and there was a big Western Electric branded Hickok laboratory grade tube tester that I remember using only one time while I was there when one of the signal generators stopped working. I asked my instructor about it, who retired after my first year, and he had been teaching there 33 years, and he said, as far as I'm concerned, you could haul that tube tester out of here today, but it's on inventory and I just don't want to take any chances. He said there might not be anything said about it, but he said, I just don't want to take any chances on that. And I said, well, I understand, and I don't want you taking any chances of possibly getting in trouble as badly as I'd like to have that thing. I don't want you to get in any trouble for it. But anyway, he retired after my first year, and then the tube tester was still there after I left, but I was told that one of the new instructors they hired, he wasted no time going in there and disposing of the tube tester and all of those old Hewlett-Packard generators and all that. Now, I understand that students today need to be taught on modern equipment. I get that, but I can tell you those modern digitally based function generators that they have, they won't be around in 50 or 60 years like this old Hewlett-Packard stuff will be. And I still think there's a place for this old equipment, because you never know. You might end up working somewhere where they still have some of this stuff on hand, and you probably would need to know how to use it. And then this Heathkit oscilloscope, that ought to be a fun little project one of these days. He had tons of reel-to-reel tapes there. I just picked up a handful of them just in case I need them for some of these old machines that I run across sometimes. And then we have this little pearl recorder, a little micro cassette recorder that looks to be in decent shape. There were only 2 turntables left, and they were up in the attic. All of the other ones he had got plucked. We have this cheapo realistic from the early, probably about 83 or so. It's one of the last BSR built jobs. Has a Shure magnetic cartridge. I think it's belt driven. And then we have this realistic Lab 395 direct drive turntable. I have the dust cover. It just needs to be reattached. And the head shell and cartridge are gone, but that should really not be a big deal. And here's that GE stereo VCR from 1984. These were generally good units. Didn't give a lot of trouble. And then we have this rather rough-looking Brunswick tabletop phonograph that had pieces laying all inside of it. I managed to slip it all back together, but it's kind of rough-looking. But it still runs. It will play a record. And then we have this Toshiba 20-inch color TV, probably from the late 90s. The picture tube feels like it's loose. I hope it's just loose mounting bolts and the plastic is not disintegrating and breaking away. But that one has stereo audio and composite video input. And then we have this realistic Radio Shack AM/FM AC or battery operated radio. Looks like it's from 1989 according to date codes. It needs the pots and the switches clean, but it appears to be about an average performer and no battery corrosion, so that's a good thing. And as far as records, the person who was there before I was that told me about it, the sale, told me that they saw somebody carting about 9 boxes of LPs out of there. Most likely some freaking flea market flipper that bought them for a little of nothing, and then they'll take each record and look them up individually on eBay and charge whatever the eBay price is. Now, I don't really have any problem with flippers as a rule, but something that they do that just rubs me raw is whenever I go to an estate sale or a thrift store and you got all these flippers there acting like vultures, just tearing through the stuff, steamrolling through everything there with a friggin' phone in hand, and each item they touch, they have to look it up on the phone. They more or less have this, can I buy this for $5 and flip it on eBay for $500 syndrome? Now, I don't claim to be an expert on anything, and I really don't consider myself a flipper, although there have been times I've acquired stuff, and then whenever I get tired of it or or whatever, I'll try to sell it, but I really don't buy stuff with that in mind. But when I'm going to a sale looking for stuff, I know enough about what I'm looking for to know if something is priced fairly or not, and I don't need a freaking phone in my hand to do that. But the problem today is you have all these shows on television that people watch, and they think just because they've watched a couple of episodes of American Pickers, then that makes them a expert, and now everybody's getting on the eBay flipping bandwagon. But I'm pretty sure all of the rock records disappeared in those 9 boxes, but I did get a few records out of the deal. Here's a sealed album set, Big Bands of the Swinging Years, a sealed stereo copy of Anything Goes by the Dave Brubeck Quartet, plays Cole Porter, Encore Henry Mancini, Morton Gold, Gold Conducts Gold, that's from the late 70s, A Perfect Match, Ella Fitzgerald and Count Basie, the Best of Stan Freberg, mid-70s Capitol reissue, Mellow Day, Anita O'Day, that's from the late 70s, Johnny Mandel's Great Jazz Score, I Want to Live, featuring Susan Hayward, the Benny Goodman Story, I think this is a mid-80s MCA reissue of an earlier Decca album. The Hits of Woody Herman, that's a mid-70s Capitol reissue. Girl in Love, Bud Shank, a steel-sealed mono copy. Les and Larry Elgert's Greatest Hits. And then we got some binders with some 78s in them. I won't go through all of them, but got a couple of album sets. Main reason I picked those up is because they're complete and look to be in decent shape there. And then we got this one here, Roy Rogers Souvenir album. But even though I hated to have missed out on all of the good stuff that got plucked, I am thankful that I was able to get what I could get. But I know, had I not got there when I did, I saw a couple of people there that I know would have grabbed that stuff that I grabbed. So, especially that test equipment, and then it would have probably got flipped on eBay for some stupid amount of money. So, there you go. And the sad thing is, the old school guys who would have stuff like what I just showed you, those kind of guys are rapidly disappearing. In fact, in another 15 to 20 years, I really doubt estate sales will even be worth going to, because the old guys who would have had that old kind of stuff are all going to be gone by then, and the younger generation doesn't hold on to stuff for 50, 60, 70 years like the older generation did. Heck, everybody now, they'll buy a new TV, and then next year one will come along that has a little bit better resolution, or a little bit bigger screen, or a little bit of this or a little bit of that, and it's like, oh no, we can't have that old thing, we have to upgrade. Whereas in the old days, somebody bought a color TV and they kept it until it was worn out and wouldn't go anymore. Now the guy running the sale told me that they were probably going to have one more sale, and whatever electronics were left over after the final sale, he would contact me and I could have it all. I'm not really holding my breath on that, because I take such things like that as a grain of salt, because I've heard similar stories before, and then usually nothing comes of it. That's just the way it is. But if he calls me, I'll go over there and get whatever they got left, although I don't think there's going to be much really left that I won't. I saw, as far as yesterday, there was a few what we call black plastic crap pieces left, but that was really about it. And another thing that pisses me off about some flippers is how they can't be satisfied with just a reasonable markup on something. No, when they're trying to buy something from you, they give you this sad sob story about how they're taking a chance by offering you anything at all for the item, and they'll offer you some single-digit figure for it, and then if you accept it, then once they get their grubby little hands on it, then it suddenly becomes a valuable collector's item and gets marked up to 3 figures, if not more. And as an example of that, this was probably 15 years ago, there was a flea market vendor that always had radios, but they were not in the greatest of shape. They were all restorable, but nothing earth-shattering, and he wanted these ludicrous prices for them, and whenever I would try to negotiate with him, oh no, I can't take any less for those. Those are highly collectible. That's what they go for online, and blah, blah, blah. And then sometime later I had it in my head, well, gee, since he's asking so much for his, maybe he'd give me a fair price for some of these that I know I'll never get to. So I took 5 or 6 of them out there to him, and he looks them over, and he's going, I don't know that I can really do much with these. Now, you know, these are hard to do anything with, but you know, I could give you a couple of dollars a piece for them, but that's about it. And I'm just really taking a chance by doing that. And I said, look, anytime I've ever tried to buy a radio from you, you won't negotiate, you think your stuff's worth a fortune, and you're going to offer me $2 a piece for what I have? I said, before I sell them to you for $2 a piece, I'll throw them up against a brick wall and bust them in a million pieces and throw them in the garbage can. And I turned around and left. Now, if I ran up on some teenager who liked old radios like I was whenever I was a teenager and he wanted them, then I'd give the kid the radios and not think a thing in the world about it. But I'll be darned, was I going to let some greedy flea market flipper have them for a couple of dollars a piece whenever he thinks everything he has is worth gold? I can guarantee you, had I sold him those radios, he'd have been laughing his butt off after I got out of there. Yeah, I pulled one over on him. I'll resell these things for $100 a piece now. Not gonna happen. And there's another vendor that I used to get some radios from, and then his prices started going up, and when I questioned him, he's like, oh, I'm having to pay more for them now. And I said, don't give me that crap. When you know what your clientele is willing to pay for something, and if you can't get it for a price that will allow you to make a profit, then you just leave it where you found it. So don't give me that crap about you having to pay more for the stuff. Somebody told me, they said, don't let him pull that line on you. He said the way he operates, he'll buy out a whole house for a little of nothing. The people will just practically give him the stuff to get it out of there, and then he jacks it way up. So don't let him give you that crap about he's having to pay too much for the stuff now. Now, on a positive note, one thing I can say about estate sales around here is they generally don't sell stuff before the advertised start time. One thing that used to irritate me with garage sales is whenever I would see something advertised that I wanted and would get to the sale at the advertised start time only to hear, oh, we sold that yesterday. Like, what do you mean you sold it yesterday? The ad in the paper said it doesn't start until 7 a.m. Oh, we had people coming by yesterday and buying stuff. And on that note, I understand getting the cash when you can get it, because if you turn them down, you might not sell it the next day. But as a buyer, it's very frustrating to go to a sale only to find out they sold what you were interested in the day before. And a friend of mine who used to live in Texas, he told me out there, he said you had to have a license, a permit, to have a yard sale, and they better not catch you selling stuff outside of your advertised start and end times, or you would get in serious hot water. So I will give the estate sale people that. From what I can tell, generally they will not sell to anybody until the advertised start time. Now, there's been some estate sale vendors that have let me come in after the fact and take any old TVs or whatever that were left, usually for free, but that's after the sale's over with and no money's changing hands. And also, most of the shoppers at the estate sales around here are usually polite, as in they're not going to snatch an item out of your hand. And generally the way things work around here, you start a pile up near the where the cashier is set up, and generally speaking, nobody messes with your pile, you know, so that's a good thing. I've heard of a few cases where you'd have a couple of haughty customers that wanted something so bad they would just snatch it out of your hand, but I've never personally had that happen to me, and thank goodness for that, because I don't know, I might not be so nice if somebody pulled that crap. Now, if somebody walked up to me and was polite about expressing an interest in an item that I was carrying, depending on what it was, I might just go ahead and hand it to them. Here, you go ahead and take it. But don't think you're going to just act rude and try to snatch something out of my hand. I think one of the estate sale vendors told me they had one lady pull that crap, and I believe they ended up asking her to leave and not to come back to any of their sales. After another estate sale was over, I got this Zenith console stereo. Now, I'm not a big fan of these particle board photo finished stereos, but this one is probably in better shape than any particle board stereo that I've ever brought home. Somebody took care of this one. As best I can tell, it's from 1980. It may have a few little minor places on it, but nothing too bad. Cheap BSR record changer that's seized up and the tone arm is dismounted, but that's no big deal if that can't be fixed. I got record changers here that I can stick in there. And then we have our AM/FM radio with 8-track recorder. That's also, for the most part, dead, so this is going to require some service. And when I got this, the back cover had already been removed. I guess someone was trying to work on it, but they were nice enough to put all the screws in a little baggie there. So yes, something like this. It's not the Zenith of the 1960s, but it's still better than the typical electrophonic and sound design junk that was being offered at the same time. And shockingly enough, on this one, no Jimmy Swaggart 8-track tape. We only had this one tape with it, The World's Most Beautiful Melodies, Reader's Digest issued tape. But we'll get this going one of these days. Now, this is probably one that I am going to try to find another home for once I get it going. And if I can't get a decent price for it, and I mean decent as in covering my investment and all that, then I'll find a place and put it here. Now, this has a pair of 6x9 speakers in it and a pair of tweeters, so, you know, it should sound respectable. And then a friend of mine invited me to his family's Thanksgiving get-together, and his brother-in-law said he had a TCL flat-screen television that died after 6 months, and after talking to the people on the phone and not being able to resolve the issue via conventional means, they told him that we'll just send you another television. So he said I could have the old one, but unfortunately somebody, probably his grandkids, have scratched the heck out of this screen. I plugged it in, and we have backlights, and it beeps at me whenever I hit the little button. This has got one of those multifunction buttons. You momentarily push it to change inputs, and then you hold it down to turn the set off and on. and it beeps at me and all that, but there is absolutely no video on the screen. Now, I'm not going to spend much time or money on this. If it's something that's obvious, I'll fix it. If I can maybe put the circuit board in the oven and reflow the solder, if that works, we'll see, but this is not anything worth spending money on, and with a scratch screen like this, even if I can get it working, you know, it's not gonna, if I get $20 out of it, I'd be doing good. So, I don't know, and the scratches may not be that noticeable with it turned on, but with most people that would be a major turnoff. Alright, so you saw my recent estate sale finds and heard my ranting about flippers and that sort of thing, so now let's attach a repair video on the end of this. Now, before we get into the repair video, I thought we'd talk about one other subject, and that's patience and making wise financial decisions. And I'll admit, I've not always made wise financial decisions, but when it comes to looking for this old stuff, there are times when I try to exercise patience and wait on something to come along locally, rather than just jumping on eBay and paying too much money for something just to have something right now. Now, yes, there's been plenty of things that I have bought online over the years that I felt like I couldn't find locally, but even still, I'm not going to pay an ultra ludicrous price for something just to own something. Now, I'll just go ahead and tell you, all of this stuff that you saw, the console stereo was marked at $50 at the sale. After it was over with, it was half price, so I got that for $25, which, considering it's in decent cosmetic shape, that's not a terribly out-of-the-line price. And all of the other things you saw, I got for $70 for everything, which certainly was not a bad price at all. Now, if I'd have got on eBay and bought just that Hewlett-Packard audio oscillator, that right there would have probably set me back at least $70, if not more, by the time shipping was added to it. It would have probably been, in today's world, it would have probably been in the $100 to $125 range just for that one item. So what I'm trying to say is, you know, be patient, and you might end up saving yourself some money. It's like these little 13-inch silver and black plastic crap color TVs that I can find just about everywhere for no more than $5 or $10. And then I get on eBay and look at completed listings and see where people are paying $75, $100, $150, $200 for such sets. And it just blows me away, because I'm thinking to myself, you don't have to do that. Get out on a Saturday morning, go to some thrift stores, go to some yard sales, go to some estate sales. I guarantee you will find you a little television like that, probably for a few dollars. Ask people you know, tell people you know that you're looking for an old CRT television. Chances are somebody's got one stashed somewhere, and they'd be more than happy just to give it to you, just to get it out of the way. But then I also got to thinking, the reason we're seeing that kind of ludicrous spending on eBay is because there are people out there that have good incomes, and they don't have the patience, or feel like they don't have the time to get out on a Saturday morning and look for stuff. So for them, when they make up their mind they want a little TV to play their old Nintendo on, then it's just so much easier for them just to jump on eBay and find a TV listed for $200 and click the Buy It Now button, and in a few days have it delivered to your front door. You know, I get the convenience, but I also get the trying to save money aspect. And I think even if I was one of those that had a large income coming in, I don't think I would be making stupid decisions like that if it was something I knew I could pick up locally without too much effort. And as far as the transportation issue, I understand that there may be people out there that for whatever reason don't have an automobile, can't drive. I get it. I'm in that boat myself. With that said, I'm fortunate that there are people in my life that get me where I need to go and get me where I want to go, but at the same time, I know those people have lives and they can't always jump every time I want to or need to go somewhere. It's like that estate sale I was just telling you about. I would have loved to have been there on the first day, but it just wasn't possible. The people I know that give me rides, they were all tied up at the moment, and that's why we had to wait 2 or 3 sales later until yesterday to go over there, and like I said, everything was pretty much picked over, but I was fortunate to get what I was able to get. But I understand all of that about the transportation, but still, there is, unless you're just itching to blow some money, there's just no need in getting on eBay and paying a ludicrous price for something that can generally easily be found on a local level for not too much money. Alright, I guess that really is enough now. Let's go through the stash of repair videos and see if we can find one you haven't seen yet. I won't pick the 3-hour repair video that I've had in the computer for probably well over a year, the one where I repaired a Zenith farm radio and actually restuffed all of the capacitors in it. I need to go ahead and release that video. It's, like I said, that was something I did a very long time ago and just never got around to putting it all together, but I think I have something short that we can stick up. This is Radio TV Phono Nut, and today we have a Sky King, which was actually made by Air King, little 4-tube curtain burner TRF set from probably about mid-30s, I would say, and it still has a curtain burner power cord on it, and we still have reception. I went home to Oregon for just one smidgen of a but we have garbled audio and loud 60-cycle hums, so I think this is gonna be needing some filter capacitors and probably the coupling cap for the output tube replaced. And I feel like this cord is a replacement. It actually looks to be in pretty good shape, so I may just leave it. That should get the bed wetters all worked up, shouldn't it? Here we are underneath. This looks to be basically untouched for the possible exception of this cord being replaced. Now, what's this paper folded up in here? Okay, that's the warning label about the power cord. When operating this set, unhank the line cord and extend it to its full length. Under this condition, the cord will feel warm. This is normal. Operating with the cord hanked or rolled up may cause it to heat excessively and damage the set. Do not cut this cord to shorten or lengthen it. So that's the label that was probably hanging off the power cord at one time, and then somebody just stuck it inside the radio, but this looks to basically be untouched. I had to move inside. It was starting to look like the bottom was going to fall out, so I don't know what value filter capacitors these are. There's no schematic that I can find, nothing printed on the part, but I went with 22 microfarad. It's not that critical, and I believe they're using the speaker field coil for a choke, so these should do fine, and we're going to solder this terminal strip right here on the chassis. Okay, filter caps installed. Well, that helped tremendously.
Doing everything. If you get a chance to, even if it's once a season, just meet up with somebody or in golf station. We're free. 95.9 FM. 9 AM.
Hey, I misspoke earlier. This does not use a field coil speaker. This is an El Cheapo set that uses a horseshoe magnetic speaker. And looks to be, I don't recall seeing an audio output transformer under there, so this is going to be one of those speakers with a high impedance voice coil, like the most magnetic speakers are, and they just have it connected directly across the plate of the output tube. Here's another electrolytic that we should have replaced. I wasn't even paying attention to that at first. It looks to come right off the cathode of the rectifier, and it's a 20 microfarad, so the others probably were as well. So yeah, I guessed pretty close there. And this guy right here looks to be the plate to grid coupling cap. Yeah, poor judgment on my part. I ended up using the only 2 axial capacitors on this terminal strip when I should have used radials. I was in such a hurry, I was just reaching into the drawer and grabbing something, trying to beat the rain out there. I really wasn't successful. So we're going to end up having to replace this one with a radial. But right now I want to check the control grid voltage, if this thing will ever warm up. Alright, we have 10 volts there, so that capacitor is very leaky and needs to be replaced. And I think once that's done, our audio will get a little clearer, and we'll probably get more volume too. Alright, there's our capacitor replaced, and this mica cap that connects between the plate of the detector tube and ground. Its purpose is to strip off any RF that might be there and shunt it to ground. We don't want nothing but pure audio at this point. Well, they just had this tack soldered on. I don't know if that was a factory thing or somebody's sloppy attempt at a repair, but I had to add a piece of lead to that capacitor and J-hook it on down here, so now it's on here and not as likely to come off. Now let's recheck our grid voltage.
Quarterback play. Now what is my evidence? The last 4...
Negative .01. It's a lot better. So was it 10 volts positive before?
6.4 yards per pass, which is not just 7th average. And has as many touchdowns as he does interceptions. And a passer rating of below 82. Remember, 100's good. 80, below 82 is not good.
This capacitor brand
championship level quarterback play.
is an out of focus. Okay, who cares? It's a Meg-like brand. Back in the day when a Meg-on was leakage, it was right. Of course, I meant that sarcastically, of course. Alright, I went ahead and put radio caps on that terminal strip and put one of the axials there off at the rectifier. Cheapy magnetic speakers, that don't sound too terribly bad.
Having term life and long-term disability insurance are crucial parts of any financial plan. Those of you.
Alright, I've got the plate bypass cap disconnected from the ground end. And checking at the ground end we have, if I can get this thing to make contact. Let me swap hands here.
For that Tuesday morning drive, thank goodness the severe threat will be over with. So as mentioned, it's very important that you have multiple ways of getting alerts. The best ways are free.
I have 44, 42, whatever volts at the ground end of that capacitor, so it's leaky as well. And we'll need to go ahead and replace that because that capacitor or the grid coupling cap that we replaced, if those got severely leaky or shorted, they could cremate that speaker voice coil. Because remember I said there is no audio output transformer here. It's a high impedance speaker that's connected directly to the plate of the audio output tube, and we don't want to burn that voice coil open. Yes, we could replace it with a conventional PM speaker and an audio output transformer, but there's no need in doing that if we don't have to. Alright, here's our across the line capacitor. I had to J-hook it a little bit because the lead wasn't long enough. And here's our plate bypass capacitor. These other capacitors technically need to be changed, but there's really not very much voltage on them, so I'm not worried about them. And there is one slight place on this cord where the insulation, the outer insulation, is a bit compromised, so eventually that will need to be replaced. But when that happens, we're just going to use a huge film capacitor as a capacitive dropper, and there's plenty enough room right here to mount that. Okay, so why are we not getting any audio now?
State Department calling you from Carter.
Well, I have bad news. We have no plate voltage on the audio output tube. But I have voltage on the other side of the voice coil, so looks like we're probably going to be replacing a speaker whether we want to or not. Well, maybe not. It looks like our wire came loose from the plate terminal inadvertently while I was trying to solder that cap in place. Just out of curiosity, let's see how many ohms this is. Alright, it reads 1K ohms. So that's pretty high resistance. Okay, reconnecting that wire got us back in business, which I thought it would. So, this is about all we're going to do to this for right now. We've resurrected it, and that was our goal for the moment. Now, technically what should be done is every one of these resistors should be checked, and any that's severely out of tolerance should be replaced. These three other capacitors should be replaced, and we should convert this resistance line cord to a capacitor for dropping purposes. Now, we could use a wire wound resistor, but there's really not a lot of room here. We could put one under here, but that resistor is going to be dissipating about 30 watts, which is an enormous amount of heat, and that's not really too good for something that's closed up inside of a wooden cabinet. So this thing has 4 6.3 volt tubes in series, so we're looking at roughly 20... Okay, that's thunder. So we're looking at roughly 25 volts is the total across this series string, so we need to drop roughly about 95 volts, and that's a pretty good task for this cord here. But I think we're ready to put it back together for now and deal with it later.
AFLottery.com for details. Kansas City University, Kansas City UMTC, University of Missouri Kansas City is proud to be a higher education partner of the Kansas City.
It's got to be KMOX.
Highway 39 North, next row of the car. 45 yards.
Got some thunderstorm activity in the area, so we're not going to get much anyway. And on top of that, these types of sets are usually not very sensitive. They're good for local stations only, and that's it.
Run right into the bridge. 95.9 FM.
It's wide open. Well, there's WSM coming in good. Cord is getting rather warm now. When stretched out properly like advised, it's usually not an issue, but when you bunch them up or have them under a rug or whatever, that's when problems tend to happen.
Radio.
But this is impressive to be such a little cheap radio and receiving as well as it is in a thunderstorm. It just goes to show back then cheap didn't always equate to junk. Even the cheap stuff back then performed adequately well for what it was. But in today's world, you buy expensive stuff that don't often hold up to its claims. So there you go. Oh, and one other thing, this dial is calibrated in both 0 to 100 and then 55 to 160 kilocycles or whatever, but oddly enough, there's no pointer on this knob. Some of these had a pointer behind the knob, and it's possible that got lost at some point when someone possibly took the radio apart for servicing or whatever, but it's no big deal. You know, those numbers are so small, they're hard to see anyway, so you just turn the knob until you hear your desired station. So I guess that's about all I've got for the little Sky King curtain burner radio. Not only did I leave the original power cord in place, I left the original caps in place, and that ought to really get them fired up. It's a little magnetic type speaker. It sounds pretty good.
This man may have been railroaded, but there's the Supreme Court ruling.
But I do agree with you guys. I definitely need to get a job from home. I'm not opposed to that.
Of course, there's no AVC in these kind of sets, and the volume control is in the antenna circuit.
My man, he gets it outside left down the line to the corner for 3, and that shot from there is off the rim no good. Rebound to Bob, South block Collins throws it. Brown is tackled during our broadcast. What are you thankful for? 4487 WSB Talks. The Shelley Winter Show. Live, local, topical, and relevant. 814 in the Cool-Ray Carrier, 24 hours traffic center. Crash cleanup still underway in Cobb County, I-75 northbound before 575.
Now they identify themselves as 95.5 WSB. They don't even mention their AM frequency anymore. And personally, I don't think that should be allowed. If they're going to be, broadcasting on AM and FM, they ought to be required to mention both frequencies. But pretty much what that boils down to is they would probably like nothing more than to do away with their AM and just broadcast on FM. And if the FCC will ever allow them to do that, you're probably going to see a lot of AM stations going dark.
Churning butter and making mattresses and stuff like that.
Talking about abnormal things.
This is about my only reason for bothering with AM radio is this station right here. One thing I will say in closing that a lot of newbies tend to get confused about, and people who just don't know any better, they'll plug up an old radio like this, like we did at the deal whenever I got this, and the radio played, but it had background hum and the audio was garbled, and they think, oh well, that's the way it's supposed to sound. So they continue to use the radio, and the whole time they're using it, the radio is just slowly committing suicide, because like that leaky grid coupling cap, that leaky plate bypass cap, had that radio continued to be used, the condition of those caps would have gotten worse. The output tube would have ended up drawing too much current, which would have not only ended up cremating the tube, but could have very easily cremated the voice coil and the speaker too. So, you know, it's not normal for an old tube radio or record player or whatever to have 60 or 120 cycle hum in the background. People who think that's normal think, oh, that's just tube hum. No, it's not. The reason they think it's normal because they're probably used to, they probably remember hearing old tube-based equipment from a long time ago that had a weak filter capacitor, and they just used it anyway like that. But this is what one's supposed to sound like.
After we got to enjoy Chet Atkins before the break. Talked also about Jack Guthrie, who was the one who wrote Oklahoma Hills, that I played from Chet. He wrote it along with his cousin, Woody Guthrie. But Jack was having a lot of success on country radio in the mid-1940s. I thought we'd go back and get him on the air now, singing for those saying on When the Captain Is in Blue. This is Jack Guthrie on WSB.
And the fading in and out, that's normal for nighttime AM radio listening as well. So I remember a friend of mine told me back in the 60s the place he worked for sold a new Magnavox multi-band portable radio to a guy, and he brought it back thinking something was wrong with the radio because the shortwave reception kept fading in and out, and he never could convince the guy that was normal. But anyway, there you go, another one resurrected.